Page 22, For Once in My Life. I have a few suggestions. I'm going to start with the right hand. Right at the beginning, take a look at the fingering right at the beginning. You start with a 1-5 and immediately go to a 3. Okay. Now, you're staying in this position till you get to the next measure. You see the last note in the right hand is an A. You got to reach up to get the A because your finger's on a G. You got to go up to get the A. And then move your hand up once you do that, because in the next measure you want third finger on the F. Okay. Get the same thing in the next line more or less. In the second line, it's the pickup to the second measure of the second line. It's 1-5. In the first line, it's G to E. Second line, it's A to F. Right? Because look in the next measure. Is this the third measure of the second line? You're going up to a B. You got to reach your little finger up. Okay. Then in the third line, it's an octave. In the last measure of the third line, watch the fingering. The first C is with the third finger. Second one's the fifth finger. Then the fourth finger, not the third, the fourth finger. The reason that those 4 notes, that's a chord and that's a good fingering for that chord. Don't use third finger. And the fourth line, second measure, fourth finger on the G. That's important. Use the fourth finger. You get the same kind of stuff on page 23. I'm not going to repeat everything. You'll find it when you get there, believe me. On page 23, though, on the 4th line down, let's look at the last 2 measures for the right hand. You have a whole note chord, an E, A, C. Use that fingering, okay? It's not the best fingering. It's not the most comfortable to get into it from the measure before, because you're here and you got to come to here. Okay, the pedal will help you out connecting them, but use this fingering for that chord. The 1, 3, 5. Then it goes into the next measure. The C, the top note, is tied, so you don't play it again, you hold it down. The bottom note, the E, that's tied, so you don't play it again, you hold it down. But the A changes to an F sharp. So the next to the last measure, you play the chord. You're going to hold it for 4 counts, and then in the next measure, you just let up on the A and play the F sharp, while holding the E and the C down. You have to be very careful about the ties. See, they have to tie every note they want tied, otherwise you have to play it again. In the last line, on page 23, in the second measure, you're starting out with an F-E, 4th finger on the D. I recommend a 1, 2, 3 for the first chord. Okay, then you can do a 1, 3, 5. On the next to the last measure, on the half note chord, I recommend a 1, 2, 4. What I'm trying to do is finger the melody legato. Okay, I don't want to rely on the piano. Thumb on the E flat, second finger on the F, third finger on the A flat, and then the 1, 2, 5 for the chord. Now the idea between the fingering I'm suggesting is because we'd like to sort of, I call it feel the melody. Okay, in the last line the melody is there. Okay, and if I can finger that in a way that helps me mentally, if I start playing little finger on multiple notes, I don't feel a melody, I just feel a bunch of notes. In the left hand, in the first measure is a 5-1, and for this next chord I prefer a 5-2, and in the next one a 5-1, and then the next one it's a 4-1, then a 5-1, and a 5-2 for the last chord of the line, and then a 3-1. You're going to get this pattern or similar to it throughout, and I recommend, if you can, put the index finger on the black note rather than the thumb. Third line down, last measure. I'm talking left hand here, right? FA is 3-1. The EA, I recommend a 4-1. And the first measure of the fourth line, I recommend a 5. And then a 3. The last two measures on page 22. Left hand, you're starting out with an AG, 5-1. And I recommend a 5-2 for the A up sharp. And then a 3-1 for the next chord. Now notice in the last measure, those two chords, those two half note chords, you have a DF and a GF, but the F is tied. So you're not going to play the F again, you're going to hold it down. You're only going to play the bottom note. Right? Don't play the F twice, just once. Page 23 is a whole lot of the same junk you had on page 22, so you can have fun dealing with that. Until we get down to line 4 on page 23. Let's just go through the whole line. Actually, we'll just go through the last two lines for the left hand on page 23, starting out in an octaves with 5-1. Okay. Then I recommend a 5-2 for the next one. And then a 5-1. The 3-2's fine. Follow the fingering they've got, it's good. Last line, starting out with 5-1, 5-2, 5-1, then you can do a 1. Now, next to the last measure, on the half note chord, the A, let's see, it's a C A flat, I recommend a 5-2. And then a 5-1 in the last measure for the CA. And that last quarter note in the left hand with a fermato, I'm going to hold it for 2 counts instead of 1 because I'm using a metronome and I just double the value. And that's that. So work this out one hand at a time until you're reasonably comfortable with the fingerings and all that stuff going on. And then you can put the hands together. Now, I don't really agree with the phrasing they're put in here. I think it's a bit choppy. A lot of times you can follow the words and you can phrase it according to the words, but it's like at the beginning here in the first line, they have 2 different phrases here, like so. I see nothing wrong with just having one phrase on that. Another phrase. And again, I would do I would connect this whole thing. They're splitting the phrase between me and. For once in my life, I go where life leads me and somehow I know I'll be strong. To me, that's one sentence. They're splitting it into 2. And I think you just one phrase, do the whole thing one phrase, no break. So in the last 2 measures of the second line, connect those. I don't put a break in it. In the third line, same thing. They're putting a break between of and long before, and they're splitting up a prepositional phrase. What's going on here? To me, it should be all connected in one phrase. So the third line, that phrase. I would connect all that together. Then start a new phrase, and I connect this. I don't do 2 phrases here. So in the last line, on those 2 phrases they're showing there, I would make that one phrase. Same thing on page 23. They're splitting these things up into two phrases, and I would combine them to one longer phrase, one longer sentence. You decide what you like better. If you like it better with the phrasing there, then by all means use that. I don't care for it. At the end, on page 23, there is a retardando. When I'm playing with a metronome, I ignore those because the metronome don't retardandos. Talk about the pedaling. This pedaling is pretty much overlap pedaling throughout. It's legato pedaling. It's all smooth. Right at the beginning on page 22, you have an eighth note pickup, but they're telling you not to put the pedal down until the next measure. I have a problem with that, and that is I want to connect the eighth note to the next measure. I don't want to break in it. The left hand is playing the G. So in order for the left hand to play the G, I got to get off the right hand G quicker. Now when I do that, I can't connect it. There's some silence in there. So I recommend, because of that, that you put the pedal down with the pickup note. So it's connecting. There. So yeah. Same thing in the second line. The first measure going into the second measure of the second line, you have an A to F, but the left hand's playing the A. So I suggest you put the pedal down with the right hand eighth note. So it's connected. We're using the pedal to help us out connecting the notes here. Now while I'm in that measure, on the first measure of the second line, we want to be picky about when we push the pedal down and when we lift it up. It's just not a haphazard thing, or whenever you blah. So in that measure, you have the pedal down, you play beat 3, the eighth note, or the quarter note, and on beat 4, both hands come up and the pedal comes up at the same time. So we get a half a beat of rest in there, right? The first half of beat 4 is silent. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. And then you put it down with the A again. Takes a little practice coordinating the pedal with what's going on in the hands, but that's all part of learning. In the third line, first measure. Well, let's start with the last measure of the second line. Okay, you're here, pedals down. Now I lift the pedal up right when I play the notes in the third line. Right, the first notes, I lift it up right there. So there's no pedal going on in here, and we want a little break between the first beat and the second beat in the left hand. Don't connect them. Now, going on, you don't have to pedal this if you don't want to until the next measure, because you can connect the C to the C. And since the left hand isn't playing a C anyway, it's better not to use the pedal, because you don't need the C sounding out throughout that. And the fourth line, page 22. Same thing as the third line. Lift the pedal up as you play those notes, and you put it down on beat 3, or right after you play beat 3. So I'm going to start with the last measure of the third line on page 22. It's this. Now notice I keep the right hand down. It's a whole note. I keep it down for the whole measure. Okay? Again. There's a break there in the third measure in the left hand between the first two beats. Okay, don't connect them. Now it could be a bit of a stretch to you in the left hand to go. I'm talking about the third measure going into the fourth on the last line. Here, here. It's a bit choppy. you can hear that break in the left hand if you're listening. What you can do, because it is what it is go ahead and pedal that fourth beat by itself. Make it a legato pedal and connect it to the next measure. So it's here. That connects them. So is we're okay? Now, at the end of the page, on page 22, you see the pickup note, the 8th note in the right hand? We want to break there. So the pedal has to come up before you play that G. Okay? You keep the left hand down. It's a half note. It's going to go the whole thing. But the right hand is going to have a slight break in the sound, and you got to lift the pedal up so you can do that. And then you put the pedal down with the 8th note, so it's just up and down real quick. So that last measure is this. Okay, show you again. You get the idea? It's, yes, I'm being picky about it, but that's what I do. In page 23, you're getting a lot of the same pedaling techniques I'm talking about on page 22. I don't want to repeat everything all over again. You'll discover it when you get there, I'm sure. 4th line down, last measure. Going into the next measure, going into the 5th line. In this measure, lift the pedal up with the right hand. See, the right hand has a dotted half note for 3 counts. And on the 4th count, the right hand comes up. Lift the pedal up with the right hand. So we get a little break in the sound in the right hand before we go on. Okay? Now, as always, bring out the melody. We want to hear the melody. I hear too many people play this piece something like this. It's yuck, don't. The melody plays according to the dynamics provided. In this case, it starts with an MP, a mezzo piano or medium soft. That's the melody. Everything else has to be under it. Whatever the melody is, everything else has to be under it. The melody controls everything that goes on. The melody is what counts. So play the melody medium soft to keep everything else under it. You find recordings of this. I don't really think I need to play the whole thing. But you get, I'm just trying to give you the idea what I think it should sound like. Having said all that junk, let's try it out. Slowly, very slowly. There is a note at the bottom of page 22 that says the 8th notes can be done in long, short pairs. Doesn't say they have to be. So you can one time play them even, another time play them uneven. So it would be like this. To you, however you want to do it. If you decide to repeat the piece and play it twice, then one time you could play it straight and the next time you could play it uneven if you wanted to. It's up to you again. It's however. Since they put the note in there, I'll go ahead and do it long and short, and you can do them even if you want. So I'm going to give us 4 counts, and we're going to come in on the end of 4. So it's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? It's a pickup to one of the next measure. Here we go. Right hand, left hand, foot's on the pedal. Yep, foot's on the pedal. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4,